Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the campus of Cal State Northridge and the Eunice and Soraya Nazarian Center for the Performing Arts. For short, we call it the Soraya. Isn't it beautiful? So on behalf of Executive Director Thor Steingraber and President Diane Harrison, please enjoy another pitch-perfect performance here at the Soraya.
Hello, welcome. Glad you can join us for Fridays at 4. I'm Thor Steingraber, Executive Director of the Eunice and Soraya Nazarian Center for the Performing Arts in Los Angeles on the campus of Cal State Northridge. And I'm here today with Janet Alber, Artistic Director of the Martha Graham Dance Company, and composer and conductor Chris Roundtree, who also leads the music collective Wild Up. And we're here to tell you about what we've been working on for the past 2 months while we were safer at home. Janet, Martha Graham created how many pieces in her lifetime? Hundreds, right?
Yeah, well, 181.
Some of them were lost. Can you give us some idea of what portion of them were lost and maybe why some were lost?
I think there's between about 50 and 55 that we can recreate today and bring to the stage. Many of them were lost because she was moving at such a rate as an artist. Once she launched her revolution and got a hold of what she wanted to do, she was just churning out stuff and then moving past it, building on it. And a lot of the solos that she did in the late 20s, in the early 1930s, she just did so many. They were almost like studies for future works of art. And I think that's the case with Immediate Tragedy, that it was of the moment in 1937, but in 1938 and 39, she added men to the company and began to move on to narrative and characters, and her structure changed.
So you're about to see Deep Song and Immediate Tragedy paired together for the first time since December of 1937. However, it's a different version of each. So Chris and Janet, tell us exactly what we're about to see.
Well, we're opening with Deep Song. It's more of a lament than I would say Immediate Tragedy is. It's dedicated to the Spanish women of the era and what they were grappling with the Spanish Civil War. It was created, both of these dances actually were created the same year that Picasso was working on Guernica. And I think the black and white reference of the costumes in both works, along with Martha's own torqued and distorted style of movement, really speak to that abstraction that Picasso was working with, as well as the theme.
And then there's a transition piece, which is percussion. Chris, tell us about that.
That's right. So the next thing you'll see is Jody Landau performing a multi-percussion piece. He uses a few drums, 2 wood blocks, and some gongs, all materials that he had in his house. Some are actual instruments, and some are one is kind of a table instead of a drum. And then the 2 wood blocks, one is a little statue, and one is a tissue box. He doesn't own wood, so they're literally just things at his house. So this piece is it's called Intermediate Percussion. And it's the Cowell piece that linked the original Deep Song and his original saraband, The Immediate Tragedy. So this is from the manuscript. And we're actually not sure if this is a premiere or not, because we're not sure if this was performed as part of that 1937 show where they did the 2 pieces next to each other, because they may have taken this out actually. So certainly this is not part of Cowell's catalog, but it's directly from his manuscript. So it's pretty remarkable and historic moment.
And then that transitions into our new Immediate Tragedy with your new composition, Chris, and the piece we just talked about. So we're bringing these pieces together, linking them with a piece of Cowell's music meant for the occasion, and all together that's about 20 minutes of performance. And we can all imagine maybe what that might have been like in December of 1937. You two have been talking in the background about Immediate Tragedy over the past 2 years. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe creating something for stage, but here we are in this moment where we're all working from home. Tell us more about what it means to create a new piece based on a historic piece while everyone's at home.
I think, Thor, you and I were talking about ways to remain creative and engage our audiences now that our worlds were completely digital. It was a huge transition, and it happened in a nanosecond. So the discussion was around what creative project could we cook up that would be true to our own missions and our organizations, but would also be of the moment. So we discussed how we might generate material, how we might collaborate with Wild Up and Chris, and we began to say, well, you know, just how will this work with all of us in separate places? And it dawned on us that we had this foundation of archival material. The son of a photographer came to us. Douglas Fraser came and said, my father, Robert Fraser, happened to be sitting in the front row of a Martha Graham performance in 1937. I've discovered these canisters of film as I was cleaning out his effects, and would you like to have them? Because we had the rolls of film, we had the contact sheets, we knew the order of the poses that were in the photos. We knew that this one happened first in the dance, then a little bit later this one happened, and you know, so their assignments started with me giving them each 4 photos of Martha Graham in Immediate Tragedy. We have 14 dancers. For the first dancer, she got 4 photos, and the 4th photo became the first photo for the second dancer. So there is some overlap in the poses that they're working with.
I'll go over to Chris for a second. You not only had to, of course, compose this in real time, but your musicians wouldn't get to practice together. Your musicians would be performing in a highly mediated circumstance, each on cameras and recording devices in their homes. So when Janet and I first spoke, and then we turned to you, your mind started spinning with how are you going to create music in this new kind of digital environment. Tell us about some of your early thoughts about this project.
Absolutely. So Wild Up has always been a group that our main focus is how do we go into a room and change what that room feels like. So to all be like really stuck in our probably small spaces, and to really be alone, and to also think of how do we change each other's room, and also how do we make something about changing a room when none of us will be in the room, where anybody who views it we won't be in the same room as the audience. The way we started, we thought, okay, well, so we're all dealing with like the modern conference meeting. So we're dealing with Zoom, or we're dealing with Skype, or whatever. So what if we tried to make a piece where we each call and respond to each other, and that latency is a big part of the piece, and grappling with latency. So I wrote some very simple melodies, kind of triangulating, you know, and my process is like, as I'm going to the grocery store, you know, with my mask on and everything else, I like improvise into my phone in the car or something. So I have this improvisation. So I started improvising, and then I make these little melodies out of that improvisation. And then I get people together normally, and we all kind of respond to one another in the room. And it's something where everybody in the band is a composer. And so we all have ideas, and we kind of put all of the ideas around that melody. So we tried this over Zoom. And immediately what happens is, even when we all try to just slate the track so we're all together, you know, if we all try to clap at the same time, which was our first test, it's like 3, 2, 1.
Popcorn. It's popcorn.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, well, so that's our baseline. That's how together we'll be at our absolute most together. And we thought, okay, well, what music works in that way? So big masses of chords, big masses of sound work very well. A melody where part of the melody is very busy, and then part of the melody is just one note. And perhaps we can use latency to show possibility. And we can think, here's a busy melody, we're not together at all, it's okay. And then we all play one note, and we all contemplate our own personal space on that one note. And so we hear all these different kind of alonenesses, but they're all related to one another and yet totally separate.
So there's 21 creative people plus a video editor on a Zoom about 6 weeks ago, and all the things we just talked about, the history, the newly discovered photographs, our desire to do something in our remote locations, And then like billiard balls, literally the work scatters to every corner of the globe. And there's a moment early on where all 21 artists are both working independently in their homes, and by virtue of these sort of prompts they've been given and the check-ins that you have on video conference, collaborating as well. Like it's the most unique combination of independent work and group work all at once. And so I want to point out that all of your artists, Chris, your musicians, and Janet, your dancers, have to be really independent-minded, collaborative, creative people at the height of their skill set and form to be able to do this, because you can't be in the room together, and that can't be emphasized enough of what an extraordinary undertaking that is. I do want to say that our early conversation, Chris and Janet and myself, was about COVID. We were all at home. We didn't know how long quarantine was going to last. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of fear and to be honest, death in the early days of the COVID crisis, and there still is, but it was new those many weeks ago, and we were responding to that moment. And now, of course, these many weeks later, we're responding to yet another moment, a related moment, and that is the protests, the police violence, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the piece still is responding in real time to the circumstances of our present day.
It's been fascinating to watch the meaning of this work we're creating morph within the context of what is our immediate tragedy.
This piece, is all about rebellion. Martha said something about getting up again.
I was upright and was going to remain upright at all costs.
It's so remarkable. That's what we're like that's at the kernel, the crystallized essence of this piece. Mm-hmm. That's where this piece began, and it's a piece about rebellion. And so many of the gestures, I think, both physically and I've endeavored musically, that those are about ascending and attempting something and then being pushed down. We must ourselves every day be working harder, and as we burn out, go again.
What a pleasure it is hearing from Janet and Chris, and what a great honor it's been to work with them for the past 2 months, commissioning and producing this new version of Immediate Tragedy. And so now, for the first time since December 1937, 2 pieces by Martha Graham paired together again. First, Deep Song, performed by Martha Graham dancer Ann Souter in 2017, and then the percussion interlude called Intermediate Percussion by Henry Cowell, and then the new version of Immediate Tragedy. We're so glad you could join us today for this historic occasion.